Well, hello readers by eyes and by ears. This is Mari Chan and welcome back to my channel. Today we are starting a new series, or rather really just a new Danmei novel. It is called Astrolabe Rebirth, still by Fei Tian Xiang, but in a completely different world from River Bay Road. This is going to be a little bit more on the sci-fi side, so I'm interested to see if I will like it. I've never read sci-fi BL before. I do just want to let you all know, because I've seen some comments from Patreon and YouTube that, am I feeling better? Yes. Am I 100%? No. I don't know what I have or what's going on. I took a COVID test. It's not COVID, but it had me completely out all Saturday and all Sunday and for a lot of Monday. And I'm awake today, but I still feel like I can't really do too much. Like even talking puts a bit of pressure on my chest, even though it's better today. So sometimes, people say, oh, when you get sick, that's your body telling you you need to take it easy, which sometimes that is the case. Sometimes people are just saying that just to say that. I don't believe that is the case in this scenario, but I am going to take it easy, just because I'm not 100% and I don't want to overtax myself. So with that being said, I'm just letting you all know that we are going to take our time with this one. Today is just going to be a little tester day. I'm going to see approximately how long I can read before it just gets a little bit too uncomfortable for my chest. Since I do releases at 10:30 a.m., I don't really have a lot of wiggle room as far as time to take breaks and come back and stuff. So today's video is probably going to be very short. And for the remainder of this week, the videos are probably going to be short. And by short, I mean under an hour long, but hopefully everything will be fine once this week is over, once whatever this is passes. And then next week we can go back to regular length videos that are between an hour to an hour and a half, and then one long day. Anyway, let's go ahead and get started. Chapter 1. The Youth from the Black Sea. In the beginning, the Creator pinned the compass of creation's fulcrum on humans and sent the other point out into the vast, chaotic, and unknown universe. With the passage of time, civilizations rose to the peak of their grandeur before disappearing without a sound. Those who knew of the possibilities yet to come foretold the limitless future by reading the space between the stars, but their prophecies did not come to pass as expected, and those blueprints that existed within their collective imagination turned out to be nothing more than fantasy. This was a terrible era. At the nucleus of the galaxy, only 3 landmasses were still inhabited by people. Mankind had undergone 3 different eras of explosive growth followed by sudden nuclear war, which had shrunk the population to less than 500 million. The resources of the nucleus were completely exhausted, and huge pipelines ran through the core of the Earth, harnessing the raw energy produced there. The surface was barren, and the country of machines occupied the greatest amount of land, the region known in ancient times as the Third Mainland. The central computer was created to become the world's new ruling machine, replacing governments, parliamentary bodies, and all other systems of law. On the day it awakened, robots conquered the world. The humans living there were either exterminated, forced to flee, or subjugated. In the aftermath, steel life forms colonized the surface. Sulfur pollution from constant years of industrial production filled the sky, blanketing the city of steel with yellow clouds. And though the surface was covered with forests of skyscrapers, they housed nothing more than icy steel factories. Humanity instead lived deep under the surface. They became slaves to the metallic life forms, and their daily lives were simple and regimented. They took shifts to sleep, and when the time came, they would get up and start working, as if they were animals kept in cages. Our main character, Aka, lived in the city's underbelly. He was one of the human residents of the area known as the Ant Nest. Aka was 16 and held the role of maintenance technician in a production line. His daily tasks consisted of receiving various mechanical life forms, helping them adjust and change their parts, and testing out the new techniques and parts that Central Technical sent him. Many odd robots passed into his care with all sorts of requests, logical or not. Replace my infrared vision scope, desired model number RM47, one android commanded. Sorry, the warehouse has run out of those, Aka answered. You'll have to wait until next month. Replace my infrared vision scope, desired model number RM47, the android repeated. There aren't any more. The warehouse is empty. Rule 3 of the Human Control Regulations, the android announced in its dead robotic voice. Humans are not allowed to reject any requests from intelligent life forms or they will be exterminated immediately. Aka tried to think of a different way to phrase the issue. This rule was the exact reason the last maintenance technician had had his head blown off. Aka stared down at his client's laser opening, which was already starting to heat up. He only had 10 seconds left to live. Counting down, the android warned. 10, 9, please wait a moment. Opening a drawer, Aka quickly pulled out a lens that had already been polished to perfection. He swapped the android's scope out with the new one, though it was actually a trash piece he'd taken off another robot earlier. This model doesn't match. The infrared lens will malfunction. That's an issue with the workmanship. It just needs some troubleshooting. Please return to the queue once more. Oh, and please rate my service before you go. The android began to capture Aka's body profile. Aka watched it with trepidation. He knew that he would get a complaint for this, but this was still better than losing his head. Eventually, the android left, and Aka let out a sigh of relief. Help me change out my power source. Another being lay down at Aka's workstation. In his mind, Aka thanked the heavens. This one was a clone. The residents of the City of Steel were split into 3 strata. At the top were the steel life forms, in the middle were the clones, and at the bottom were Aka and the other original humans. Clones were quite different from the chilly mechanical androids, and they were the beings closest to humans. Do you require a battery or a nuclear core? Aka asked. Battery, the clone answered, before shooting a glance at the android that had just left. I thought you might be shot point blank by the laser and sliced to ribbons. It would have been a pain if you had. My pathfinding system had been glitching quite a bit, and if I didn't get it replaced here, I won't know how to get back. With that, the clone turned around, and Aka opened a small box built into his back. Oh, your GPS has been affected by moisture. After turning on the light, Aka replaced the faulty part with a spare. The clone simply sat there without making a sound, and Aka couldn't help staring at his side profile. All clones were male and had identical features, so humans could only differentiate them by their outfits or their serial numbers. This issue had confounded Aka for a long while. Compared to the steel life forms like androids, Aka was more willing to provide services to the clones, if only because they could also feel emotions like joy, rage, grief, and contentment. Unlike the robots, they could occasionally be affected by their hormones as well. By contrast, if a human carried out the wrong command in front of an android, they would be exterminated, no questions asked. You're new, the clone remarked. How do you know? Aka took a look at the records on the computer screen, which indicated that this clone had not appeared at his workstation, at least not in the past 3 years. Because you're very curious and have spent so long watching me, Most of the humans fresh from the ant nest are like this at first. Akka didn't dare to reply to that. According to the advice his predecessors had given him, it was best not to provoke the clones either. The effects of emotions like happiness and pain were stronger for clones, and as soon as the hormones in their bodies became imbalanced, they would kill any human in front of them, just like an android. Losing focus while working, the clone said, makes it easy to slip up, and your customers' reviews will drop as a result. Akka hurriedly nodded. Thank you for the reminder. The rating system Akka was subjected to allotted him a total of 5 points. Every time he received a D, he was docked a point, while receiving an A granted him a point. If he ever lost all 5 points, the enforcement system would mark him as necessary for disposal. Humans so marked were deemed no longer able to contribute to society. They would be brought to the rebirth processing factory, where they would undergo protein dissolution. In other words, death. Their bodies would be broken down into their elements before being returned to the biological energy system, where they would be reassembled into new clones or turned into raw materials for nutrient production. Akka replaced the battery for the clone's positioning system, then switched out his old navigation chip for a new one as well, so that the pathfinding would work even better than before. Done, Akka said. You are very technically skilled, the clone said easily. Thanks. When the clone left, he casually scored Akka a D. Though Akka's heart was filled with rage, he didn't dare utter a sound. Stealing a fleeting glance at the screen of his computer, he saw that there were still 30 seconds before he was off work. The seconds squeaked by slowly. When the electronic chime finally sounded, Akka rapidly put the tools back into order and tidied his own belongings, then turned and headed toward the passageway behind him. Please leave the maintenance stand within 10 seconds, an electronic female voice reminded him. Akka entered this circular tunnel. The sound of footsteps was concentrated but orderly as the shifts changed for the maintenance area. Humans flooded into the central hall from every direction and passed through the metal detector that beeped incessantly. Beyond the main door, the platform suddenly descended as it began its journey below the surface of the earth. Human workers of all ages wearing the same uniform as Akka converged on the platform from many other tunnels. They piled into the elevator as it went, the riders either aiming to go up or down. Their faces were harried as they pressed up against each other in that cramped, narrow space. None of them spoke a single word. The first time the elevator came to a stop, 2 patrolling robots entered. The swarm of people hurriedly backed up to create space for them. With a ding, the red light lit up, and an electronic female voice warned, awaiting the passage of another elevator. It was extremely stifling inside the elevator, and everyone was sweating, but they didn't dare to shift unnecessarily or say anything. That was when a person standing by Akka nudged at him with his wrist. Akka turned his head. It was only then that he realized the 2 robots had their cameras turned toward him. The elevator's surveillance camera flickered to life, and a circle of light unfocused and then refocused as it locked onto the pocket on his chest. Akka felt like his heart would leap out of his chest from how hard it was beating. What did you do? The person next to him asked quietly. They seem to be watching you. In that instant, Akka's entire body trembled. While he'd been working, he had secretly hidden away a chip. The electronic voice of one patrolling robot sounded. Warning, your body temperature is elevated. Everyone in the elevator grew alarmed. The patrolling robots each carried their own infrared sensors to monitor all humans within the ant nest. Akka instantly imagined what that would look like. Within the infrared sensing system of the patrollers, the outline of his overheated body would burn bright as a fire. There's nothing out of the ordinary, right? Akka asked in a tremulous voice. I haven't violated any laws. The whole crowd was watching Akka now. With another ding, The green light of the elevator came on again, and it continued to travel downward, rumbling loudly as it went. "You must undergo an inspection," the patrolling robot said. "Warning, beginning 4 kinds of inspection." I'm done for, Aka thought. As soon as the patrolling robot found the chip he'd stolen, he would immediately be gunned down. Sweat dripped down his back as his mind went completely blank. Just then, a middle-aged mechanic standing behind Aka spasmed, his face white as a sheet, perspiration pouring down his forehead like rain. Suddenly, he convulsed violently, almost hitting Aka. The man then grabbed Aka's shoulder, prompting him to turn around. He didn't understand what was going on. Save me! Save me! That middle-aged mechanic seemed to be clutching at his last ray of hope as he seized Aka's hand. At that second, everyone realized one thing. This man was about to be terminated. Arriving at the ant nest, the robotic woman's voice announced. The elevator door opened, and the middle-aged man shoved Aka aside as he dashed away. "Warning! Stop immediately!" Rushing out, the patrolling robots followed in hot pursuit. The person in the elevator swarmed out after them, only to see the man continue to sprint through the hallway. "Get down!" someone shouted. Noise exploded in the crowded hallway. The surveillance camera installed on the ceiling shot a small, thin metallic nail. Revealing its wings, the nail began to dart wildly back and forth through the air, like a dragonfly. A loud crack rang out above the clamor as the fleeing middle-aged man took the flying nail straight through the skull. His limp limbs flew akimbo as it pinned him sharply against the wall. The bystanders burst into agitated discussion. Aka remained covered in cold sweat. According to the conversations around him, that mechanic had garnered 3 D ratings today. So after he finished his last supper, he would have been escorted away to be disposed of. While the patrolling robots cleaned up the cruel scene, Aka took the opportunity to hold his breath and leave the hallway. He walked faster and faster until he reached the end of it, where he couldn't help but run into the bathroom to shower. Turning on the cold water, he washed his body, trying to cool himself down even as his anxiety heated him back up. At the same time, he attempted to calm the frantic, violent beating of his own heart. Aka's entire body was soaked and dripping with water when the horror of what he'd seen enveloped him. He knew what the final fate of that mechanic would be. The corpse would be taken away and put into a factory to freeze. Then it would be dismembered and tossed in batches into decomposition solution to corrode, disintegrating into basic nutrients that would be used to create new clones or turned into animal fodder. A wave of rage and pain flooded his heart. He wanted to scream, but he couldn't summon his voice for it. He wanted to vent, but nowhere was safe. There were surveillance cameras everywhere. He didn't even dare let out a wordless roar. With his back to the surveillance camera, he pulled out the stolen navigation chip that he had stashed in his shirt pocket and examined it. The chip burned like a heated coal in his hand, terrifying him with its mere existence. He needed to get rid of it quickly. The more he thought about it, the more it scared him. Walking out of the shower room, he dried himself off before starting toward his living quarters. The humans of the ant nest came and went around him, each carrying out their own duties. When he returned to his own section, Aka finally let loose a breath. He was absolutely exhausted, and this had only been his first day on the job. He looked at his watch. He had just 10 hours to rest. As he entered the living quarters, someone nodded at him. Aka returned the courtesy with a stiff smile. "Aka Guga's back from work," a child called. "What was the service like?" A teenager also walked over and patted him on the shoulder. "How do you feel about your first day of work?" "It was all right," Aka said with a nod. Among those who lived here, a large portion were younger than Aka. The ant nest was divided into 14,000 sections, and the workers from each section were their area's human representatives. The behavior of these human representatives on the surface directly affected the quality of life for the entire section, while the rest of the humans were left to undergo training from the robots to reproduce in relative privacy or to learn skills. People who went through many rounds of tests but never mastered any kind of skill were also deemed to be non-contributors, and the only thing that awaited them was disposal. The D Aka had gotten today weighed heavily on his mind, as well as the fact that he was going to be sued soon. The legal system would analyze the video recordings of his work. If he was lucky, maybe he would only be given a B, which wouldn't add or dock points. But if he was scored another D, the pressure on him would become enormous. The younger ones were sitting in the lounge, reading. Aka sat to the side and was quietly eating his allotted meal when he noticed a very small child slumped by the table watching him. "Can I eat your fruit?" the child asked. "Of course." Really quickly before we continue, it is storming really badly outside, so if you guys can hear noise in the background, it's the storm causing some noise. I don't know specifically what, but I just wanted to say that before I continue reading. Aka handed the fruit to him, and as soon as the child got it, he ran off to share the special gift he'd been given with the rest of his playmates. In no time, the electronic voice broadcast a notice. It was the hour for sleep, and humans who needed rest were to return to their sleeping chambers. Subsequently, Aka tossed the plate that he had polished off into the trash bin, and with an anxiety-ridden heart, did as he was told. Every human had their own sleeping chamber that served as their only personal space within the ant nest. Aka set the noise for his chamber to the slumbering frequency before climbing in. The space was wide, enough to fit 2 people side by side, and there was only a small green potted plant in the chamber. Soon, after he entered it, the hallway outside darkened, and the hatch to the sleeping chamber closed. Aka turned on the reading lamp and pulled out the aged navigation chip he had stolen. This chip would be very useful to him. Still, he should rest a little bit before using it. He didn't want to go outside, at least not today. Besides, only the void of sleep would let him temporarily forget about the troubles of getting that D. After the slumbering frequency began to play, he lay there for a while, his frustration mounting as he tossed and turned. He forced himself to close his eyes, but he just couldn't fall asleep. Instead, his mind returned again and again to the machine that he had hidden away down below, as well as the navigation chip that he had stolen. Sleep remained elusive. After half an hour, Aka got up, opened his chamber, and slipped out. Within the sleeping hall, row upon row of other chambers glowed with blue light. Aka left the hall rapidly, pressing down on the sensor to verify his fingerprint as he returned to the living quarters. Many humans were still in this area, which was fairly normal. Aka, however, ducked into a safety tunnel and descended the stairs to the bottom, hiding in a corner just before a bend. Abruptly, he heard a quiet noise from behind him, as if the door had been opened by someone. The blood froze in Aka's veins. Who was there? Aching to turn his head, he nevertheless forced himself to suppress the desire. "You can't look," he admonished himself. There were no robotic noises, so it wasn't a guard. It was probably a human coming this way for who knew what purpose. Unless... Had someone else discovered this tunnel? He heard the sound of the door closing and let out a relieved breath. Only then did he dare to turn his head back and look. No one was there. Regardless, he still felt uneasy, and when the surveillance cameras turned away, he stayed still for 3 seconds before darting out like an arrow and rapidly clambering into the garbage chute. Sliding down the long chute, Aka traveled all the way to the waste container far outside the living quarters. The trash inside the container was incinerated once every 6 hours, and the area was filled with a pungent smell of smoke that had not yet dissipated. He climbed out from a hole in the garbage chute and made his way down a rusty ladder. Now that he was outside, the sea breeze blew into his face, and the roar of the tides weighted the air around him, as if the sea itself was drowning him. The garbage chute led directly to the harbor, where the sky, the land, and everything in between were dark. Lightning cracked, connecting the sky and the sea in brief flashes, and the crashing waves and roiling thunderclouds seemed to warn him to turn back as soon as he could. With this kind of absurd weather, Akka began to regret coming here today. He was still drowning in the anxiety of recent events. Had someone discovered this tunnel? But how could that have happened? The waste container had been unmonitored for a long time now, and there hadn't been any new footprints recently. Either way, this was not a good day to set out. Compared to the vastness of the sky and the ocean, Akka was no more than a little black speck carefully crawling across an exposed reef as he picked his way toward a hidden cave by the shore. Inside the cave, he had stashed a machine of his own making. While he made his way over, he prayed for it to still be there, that it hadn't been taken. If the legal system became aware of what he had done, Akka knew that the only thing that awaited him was disposal. But since he'd been 10, when he had unwittingly discovered the passageway in the garbage chute that led to the outside world, he couldn't help wishing to breathe the air outside. Though the air was filled with the constant, pungent smell of sulfur, and the surface of the ocean was stained with black crude oil, none of it could stop Akka's heart from yearning for freedom. In the past 6 years, he had gathered survival necessities from the ant nest and some scrap steel from the garbage chute, and he had moved them here a little at a time. At first, he'd only wanted to build a small boat and leave the city of steel in search of a place where he could live. He had heard that on the other side of the ocean, there were still places for humans. There, no central computer called Father controlled everything, and there were no robots that could cruelly slaughter humans at any time. It was a nation where humans were truly independent. Akka wanted to reach that place, so he began to use his knowledge to gather the necessary parts to make a vehicle that could carry him. However, the materials he collected were random bits and pieces of all kinds, and in the end, he had cobbled together a strange mechanical apparatus that sort of resembled the mechas the androids used. He'd left enough space inside the robot for a place to sit so that it could be driven, and he'd given it a name, K. Compared to the intricate, complex workmanship of the City of Steel, which used nuclear reactors to power steel life forms, this thing called K was more like a hunk of junk. But Akka was very proud of his creation. At least K wouldn't take commands from Father or the legal system, and it wouldn't ever point a laser at a person. It would do whatever Akka told it to do instead. This power to control a robot, to make it follow human orders, gave Akka a massive sense of accomplishment. He couldn't help but treat Akka as his only friend. After all, K was a secret that Akka had kept with great difficulty. He didn't dare tell anyone about it, but he hoped that one day he would be able to drive K away from here. Before then, he needed to install a setup on K that would extract tritium from seawater to supply power to its fusion reactor. The interior of the cave where K rested was dark and damp, and the thunder and crash of the waves outside seemed earth-shatteringly loud. When Akka entered the cave, he turned on the light before pulling out the oilcloth draped over K. The steel shell stared back at Akka. It currently had no intelligence, but Akka planned that, one day, he would help it achieve a simple sort. Prying open the front cover of K's chestplate, he installed the navigation chip that he had stolen and tested it out by connecting it to the power source and waiting for the navigation system to initialize. Outside, every peal of thunder was louder than the last, and the waves pounded wildly, as if something was slamming with all its might against the side of the cave. Afraid the water would get into the rocky cave, Aka couldn't wait around for Kay to start up, so he ran for the outside. Just as he was leaving, some large object was caught up in the violent wave and swept toward the entrance of the cave. Ah? Aka's voice was drowned out by a huge bang. In that instant, he saw something glowing in the seawater, and that something struck several rocks as it floated its way toward the entrance of the cave. 4 or 5 metallic cracks echoed as it hit some rocks that were about 30 feet off the ground and then fell. Aka had been drenched from head to foot by the surge of seawater, but he forgot all that in his shock. Sprawled in front of the entrance, he looked down and saw some shiny object being swept away by the black waves. It seemed to be something big, and maybe it would be of some use. Still, he didn't dare to head down rashly, or the tidal wave would immediately sweep him away. First, he turned off Kay's power source to prevent any short circuits. Then he peeked anxiously out from his position near the entrance. The waves gradually abated, allowing him to see the foreign object more clearly. A metal chest, aimlessly bobbing in the water, pushed now and then toward the shore by the waves before being sucked back into the ocean by the tide. Aka prayed for the heavens to leave that chest behind. What could be inside? Maybe it contained the fusion reactor that he so desperately desired, or its material could be made into a new body for Kay. The waves gradually quieted down as the sea recovered its tranquility. The tempest had passed. With great difficulty, Aka navigated down to the beach, where black petroleum covered the entire surface of the ocean. He left a trail of footprints as he walked. That was when a wave pushed the chest to the shore, and he saw it clearly. Following the coastline, Aka sprinted toward the steel chest. When he gazed upon it from the reefs above, it hadn't seemed real. As he drew closer, he realized that it wasn't really a chest. It was a sleeping chamber. Aka stared at it suspiciously, but just as the waves were about to sweep it away again, he rushed into the sea and exerted a tremendous amount of strength to push it back to shore. As he examined the sleeping chamber, Aka saw a faint symbol on it the shape of a lion. The Lion Republic? Though the exterior was mottled with rust and draped with seaweed, the object seemed very durable. It must have floated in the ocean for a very, very long time, but not all of it was intact. There was a hole in the top of the chamber, and through it Aka could see that it was half filled with crude oil, within which lay a corpse. Aka sighed. Having drifted on the ocean for so long, it must have rotted by now. Was there anything valuable left? Pulling out a wrench, he tried to pry open the sleeping chamber, but it didn't budge an inch. He panted loudly as he scrabbled at it for a long while before his eyes caught on a line of words on the lower section of the sleeping chamber. Year 7210, 4th month. Hey, sure. Year 7210? Aka was shocked. They were in the year 10,073, so this chamber was from almost 3,000 years ago. He stared at it for a long time before he realized that he couldn't keep dragging things out like this. He searched for the switch for the sleeping chamber with some difficulty, as this ancient machine's layout was completely different from all the technologies that he knew. Finding something this old was like acquiring a priceless gem, and he held his breath, imagining that he had discovered a new world. Thoughts of forgotten tech flooded his brain. Perhaps the ancients had left behind some sort of energy source or a weapon. On a much smaller scale, even if it was just a few slabs of circuit boards, it would be useful. Aka didn't know what he touched to cause it, but the entire sleeping chamber unexpectedly lit up. Shocked, he jolted and quickly backed away, his limbs flailing. At least there shouldn't be anyone alive inside the sleeping chamber, he thought. It has been almost 3,000 years. Slowly, the chamber opened, and Aka scrambled over to discover a second layer of the chamber nestled within. The space between the two chambers was filled with crude oil and seawater, which spilled out in that instant, and wave after wave of heavy fog slowly rolled out. The inner layer was clear, and on it flashed a low energy warning. The lid of the chamber opened. The fog within seeped out and dissipated. Inside lay a man without a shred of clothing. His hair was very short and black. His hands and feet were even in length, and he was perhaps 6 feet tall. Akka stared at him unblinkingly, then reached out to touch the body. That man was still alive. All right, everyone. I have done what I can today. It has taken me over an hour just to record slightly under 20 pages because I had to keep starting and stopping, and it's just, oh my God. So this is all I can give you guys today. I hope you enjoy it. I do have some thoughts, but I can't share them right now. The only thing I can say is I do like the sound of this. The tone is completely different, and it seems very interesting. So I'm hoping this will be a truly good read. Anyway, there should be a post going out later today on both YouTube and Patreon of the bingo cards. So there are, I think 3 or 4 different bingo cards to choose from. You guys can, of course, do this on your phones, or you can print them out and make your own little strips to cover, or use markers to cover the spots when we play the game. But I just wanted you to know that those bingo cards will be available to you all, I think around like 2:30. And honestly, when we play, I don't care like if you play on more than one card at a time or just one at a time. It really doesn't matter, but however you do it. Anyway, I need to stop talking. So this is all for today. Depending on how I feel later today, maybe I'll be able to record another chapter, and then in the morning I can record another chapter. So maybe it's 2 chapters. We'll see just how things progress. But you all have an excellent day and or night, and wa'ai niman.